Today we have news about fire defects at one of the largest housing developments in the state, at the Phoenix Park Racecourse. Up to 550 apartments are affected by major deficiencies, which would mean that fire could race through the common areas and spread into other apartments. These are just some of the 100,000 apartments and duplexes around the state affected by latent defects. The vast majority of apartments built over the course of the last 3 decades are affected. People affected are facing bills of up to €67,500 in some cases, and most don't even know it yet. Even more importantly, many are living in unsafe apartments. On prime time last week, Philip, who lives in the Crescent in Park West, spoke about his fear. He lives in the 5th floor, and he wouldn't be able to make it down in time to escape a fire. Minister, we have multiple potential Grenfells in this country. And how did we get here? Where a big majority of these apartments are unsafe. Because of a regime of self-certification introduced first by Fine Gael and then passed by a Fianna Fáil government. One which allowed the builders to just certify that they had built according to the plan. What is somewhat unique in the case of the Phoenix Park Racecourse is that the developer, Flynn and O'Flaherty, is actually still on site. But, reportedly, they've told the affected owners they can see no basis to get involved. The cost is on them because the apartment blocks were completed approximately 18 years ago. Wash their hands of it. In other cases, developers are still operating under their existing name. In yet other cases, the developers are still operating, but they've just changed their name. In the case of the Crescent Park West, the developer, Harcourt Developments, has recently received a major state contract for the redevelopment of the North Quays in Waterford. What is going to be done, Minister, to hold these developers responsible for their corner cutting, for their profit pursuit, which puts people's lives at risk? Do you think they should just be allowed to walk away with no consequence for building unsafe homes? Do you agree that they should be prosecuted for criminal negligence? Do you agree that they should not get any more state contracts? Do you agree that the law needs to be changed so that the statute of limitations for civil cases does not start to run until the faults are discovered? I'm in touch with hundreds of residents of apartments and duplexes who are affected. They were all glued to prime time last week where their story was told. But they were deeply concerned by what Minister O'Brien had to say. Over and over he repeated, he said the victims of these defects would be given help. It is not help that they're looking for. It's not tax credits they're looking for. It's not some partial compensation. This is not their fault at all. They're looking for recognition. This is the government's responsibility, the builders and developers' responsibility, and they're looking for 100% redress with the state taking full responsibility and pursuing the developers.
Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Murphy, for raising what is, I know, a very serious matter, and of course a particularly serious matter to those homeowners that have now been affected by these fire and these safety risks. I know the homes that you're referring to, Deputy, and I can only imagine the worry and the anxiety that many different homeowners are facing at the moment, as they have a right to be concerned regarding their own safety and the safety of their properties that are their homes. But Minister Darragh O'Brien and the government have recognised the scale of this issue and are already working on a response as to how our government can respond back to the issues of safety, the issues of defects that is growing in scale, that there will need to be a government response back to. This work is taking 2 different forms at the moment, Count Corla. First, it is the work that is underway regarding how we can reform our building control policy, to look at what are the right measures that need to be in place to give us confidence that this won't happen again in the future. This work is already happening. The work that is now happening is how our building control regulations can be amended, establishing a National Building Control Office, and the Building Works Act of 2022 that puts in place a regulation for providers, and then finally establishing a new building standards regulator. So this work is now happening at the moment. It is happening to look at how the issues that Deputy Murphy is raising at the moment, how we can prevent those happening in the future, and if they do happen, how we can be clear on what the response back. And what we need to get to, which Minister O'Brien and the government are committing to do, is full certainty regarding what is the responsibility regarding the delivery of these homes, these buildings, what is the responsibility of those building them, and then what is the responsibility of those who are regulating them, and how action will be taken to prevent this happening in the future. But I'm very conscious, Deputy, that the answers that I'm giving you are about how we can deal with this in the time ahead. In terms of how we respond back to the issues that you're raising in Phoenix Park that exist beyond the Phoenix Park, it is why Minister O'Brien in July of this year brought forward the report of a working group in defects in housing. This demonstrated to us the scale of the issue, the risk that we could have between 62,500 and 100,000 homes, apartments, duplexes, houses affected by this, and in that work noting that indeed it is fire safety defects that could be the most serious issue. A working group has now been established to respond back to that report, and I expect that we're going to get the conclusions from that working group very shortly that will put in place a national framework for the government to respond back to the huge difficulties that Deputy Murphy is raising here today.
Thanks. These developers have cost people and are going to cost people bills of 20,000, 30,000, 70,000 euros. Offloading responsibility from themselves onto ordinary people who simply cannot afford it. More than that, they have put people's lives at risk by their actions. And yet they're still in operation. In this case, they're still in operation on the same site. How can that be allowed and able to wash their hands of it? How can Harcourt Developments be receiving massive state contracts, public money, after putting people's lives in danger and facing them with massive bills? The government needs to act to prevent this. They need to stop giving state contracts to these developers. Finally, in relation to the scheme, what I want to say to you and the government is that if the scheme that is brought before Cabinet before Christmas is anything less than 100% redress, it will not be accepted by the residents. You will have a Micah-style movement on your hands. This is 1 in every 20 homes in the state is affected by this issue. On the final Wednesday of this Dáil, on the 14th of December, the Not Our Fault campaign will be outside protesting. We hope to have seen the outlines by then. If there is not 100% redress, you will be facing a massive campaign on this issue.
Murphy, one of the few things I'm certain on is regardless of what the government brings forward, it won't be enough for you. What you've already decided, I've little doubt at all, is when Minister O'Brien and the government agree on proposals in relation to you, it will instantly be condemned by you as being insufficient and not enough. What the government is redress, we will accept it, no problem. I'll restate that again. What we know is regardless of what we bring forward, it will be condemned by you as being insufficient. You probably already have the tweet written and ready to go. What we know is this is a countrywide issue. Because it is a countrywide issue, we recognise that the number of properties that are being affected by it is serious. And of course, the deputies on this side of the House represent these communities too. All of us have this issue. But because we have this issue, we have to realise and recognise that the costs, the complexities involved in responding back to this are going to be very significant. The government has already done our very best to offer support to those of communities that have been affected by Micah, with a commitment of many billions of euro. And as I said at the very start, Ceann Comhairle, the government absolutely appreciates the trauma and anxiety caused by so many, by factors that they had nothing to do with. And what we will be bringing forward shortly is response back to the task force on defects in homes and doing our very best to make a meaningful difference to those homeowners that have been affected by such a grave difficulty.
Now we move